Welcome. This is Education for the 21st Century. This is a monthly podcast and podcast brought to you by the College of Education and the Leadership Program in Educational Leadership at Lehigh University. We focus on challenging issues in today's society. We highlight educational leaders, higher education administration leaders, societal leaders, and all-around good folks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today is a special treat. Today we have Thomas Parker, the Superintendent of the Allentown School District, and we have a return visitor, Dr. Lucretia Brown, also from the Allentown School District. And at this time, as always, Tashina, welcome to the program. And
hello, everyone. I'm going to introduce Mr. Parker today. Thomas E. Parker was named Superintendent for Allentown School District in December 2016. He implemented several district-wide initiatives that focused on improving student achievement, with a special emphasis on closing the achievement gaps among underachieving groups. His numerous programs, including a one-to-one technology initiative, have resulted in Ecorse being recognized as Future Ready District and making it one of the only districts in Michigan with a 100% school-to-home technology program. He has served as Harper Woods High School and Middle School principal and founding principal of Harper Academy for the Harper Woods School District in Michigan, principal of Osborn College Preparatory Academy, and assistant principal for Martin Luther King Jr. Senior High School and Chadsey High School, dean of students, interim curriculum leader, and teacher for Detroit Public Schools, and program coordinator of Cranbrook Schools, Horizon Upward Bound in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Welcome.
Thank you.
all right, Gina?
So, as receiving all of your degrees in education, what first sparked your interest in this area?
So for me, coming to education was really about my passion and about my purpose in life. I knew from an early age that I was going to do something that was in a service industry. I knew that in some way I was going to do work that was meant to enhance the lives of others. And when I found my space in education at Howard University, it just kind of blossomed. I had the opportunity to find a field that allowed me to touch the lives of kids and community on a daily basis, and becoming a teacher was really where my passion was. But then I had the opportunity to enter a program called the Ronald McNair program. And Ronald McNair is one of those trio programs designed for families and students that are first generation college students, but this is the graduate school entry program. And I had no clue that graduate school was an option. I grew up, as a poor black boy in Mississippi. I didn't see these possibilities. But through that program, I really was presented with the opportunity to enhance and expand and really build capacity on my desire to be a teacher. And ultimately, the vision for principal and superintendent began to blossom. And I had the opportunity through folk invested in me in those programs to give me extra access and exposure, right? Those equity-based programs to really dream through ways that I could transform the world. And that's kind of what brought me to this space.
That's phenomenal.
That's amazing. And I didn't mention it, but like I said, I'm originally from Michigan, but I spent about 9 years in Alabama, and I taught in Selma, Alabama. Alabama is where I did the majority of my teaching. In your bio, the one-to-one technological initiative was mentioned in Michigan. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So in Ecorse Public Schools, and it was a smaller district, but a district that had some really strong fiscal challenges that began to play out in the academic world as well. So we had two schools that were identified as, at that time, I think they were called the persistently low achieving schools. But we're able to realize some grant funds through the state, through the SIG grant, to enhance academic achievement there. As you know, if it's Allentown or Ecorse or any other urban district that has issues with poverty, there's a digital divide that's pervasive. And we want our kids to be able to compete with the world. And if we want our kids to be able to compete with the world, we have to provide them the tools necessary to learn, and technology, not just to kind of swipe, right? We want them to have technology that allows them to be information creators. So envisioning how we were going to transform and transition the district, we decided to implement a one-to-one program, invest the grant funds as well as some district funds to ensure that every kid in the district had access to a device on a daily basis, and the expectation that teachers begin to kind of instruct using technology. We connected our parents to technology. That digital divide speaks not just to the kids, but to the parents as well. So creating opportunities for them to engage technology via like parent resource centers, bringing them in, helping them understand and engage. It was really a whole district initiative to ensure that we gave our kids that kind of leg up opportunity so they could compete.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. And now I'm bouncing around, but that's okay. It's our show. We can do that. What I just thought about, I've been here for, since I came in the fall of '09 to the Lehigh Valley. And it's so powerful to hear the vision of equity now seamlessly integrated into the vernacular, into the conversation. And Dr. Brown has been working on equity-related research and issues for quite a while. How has it been inserting that language into the conversation, the narrative, and not making it on the periphery? As in a lot of places, well, it's in the community, it's a given, it's a diverse district, but you've actually have integrated into the mission and into what it is you're doing on a daily basis. How's that process going? How is it evolving? How's it working?
Right. So here's where I'll begin, and then I'll pass the ball to Dr. Brown. Right. So when I entered the district, Dr. Brown was here as the director of equity, and had kind of transitioned to that space from, I think, was equity coordinator, based on the consent decree that the district had with the Department of Justice. Equity kind of existed as a responsibility, but outside of kind of the core in a significant way. However, this is where we give kudos to the work of our board directors. The board directors in 2017 actually passed an equity policy, one of the first districts in PA to pass an equity policy that pushed equity to the core of the work that we were doing from a resource allocation with time, people, energy, skills, etc. So utilizing that as the basis of kind of the philosophy, we revisioned the way our organization was aligned. And when I envision equity at the core, there's no way you can do that if you don't have equity at the highest level of your organization. There's no way you can do that if you don't have the modules, the systems, and the resources that are provided to us by the state, local, and federal government actually flow through equity. And then you have equity as a touch point and a checkpoint on all of the other resources and units that we have in our district. So we created the Office of Equity and Accountability and realigned some specific organizational resources under that domain. I love to say, if you look at the National Title I program, the federal program, that is the federal government's commitment to equity. We don't often talk about it in that way, but those are federal funds that are designed and systemically implemented, or should be systemically implemented, to ensure that districts focus on the core elements of equity. So our grant programs now are no longer sitting in the instructional domain. They sit in the Office of Equity, parent and community engagement, community outreach, a number of areas that had previously kind of existed elsewhere in the organization now flow through the Office of Equity and Accountability. And, oh, by the way, we have one of the most dynamic equity leaders in the country that that's a member of, no pressure. That's a member of the Allentown School District, right? Dr. Brown is a national expert in equity. So having her transition from the space of a director to assuming assistant superintendent for equity and accountability speaks volumes to our district. And so now let's talk about accountability, right? All of those other pieces that flow through are really great. Grants flows through, all those things are meaningful. But when you align accountability with equity, that means that in everything we do, the way we measure success is based on the principles of equity. And our district equity coordinator, equity director, assistant superintendent for equity, now is the final checkpoint for success based on those core principles. So I think when you implement that way, you're really sending a strong message that our district is invested in equity, and that for all of the leaders we have in the district, equity won't be an afterthought. Right. Disaggregating data and looking at success for our subgroups, for our ESL population, our African American population, that won't be an afterthought, because they know that any information coming to the district is going to be addressed through the lens of how it's affecting all students in the district. Dr. Brown, anything you want to
Not
add
much
there?
to add after that. What you could hear from Mr. Parker is this whole notion of being very strategic and intentional, and along with him being a thought partner / supervisor, I think that he added vision and that strategy that we needed. When I came into the district and meeting and working with you on projects, we were advancing equity, but it was really disjointed, like Mr. Parker said. So under the board leadership, his leadership, we had a chance to really sit down and map it out so that we could have greatest impact, not solely from the Office of Equity and Accountability, but all of our executive leadership really beginning to adopt a mindset of core principles to support equity in their areas as well, under, again, that policy and the restructuring, if you will, of the organization. But it really developed organically. So I would say that while the process was challenging sometimes, it had to be that way. It needed to develop organically, so that when the right leader came along, he could organize and get it into place so that we could effectively service our clientele, our families, and our students in our community.
So how do you see that in the day-to-day, walking through the halls, walking in the classroom? How do you see that?
So just like with any other, and I'm sorry, I didn't know if you would, with any other sort of change management or a continuous process strategy, you see it in different pockets first until we get to the point where it's fully implemented. So I would say now that we have begun to give our employees, our students, our families language to shape their understanding, we start with any of our initiatives with the very beginning, with Parker coming in, the strategic framework. Where did this originate from? So that we develop shared understanding to chart the course. So it's not one person or one building or one pocket of the organization viewing equity in another way or differently than another building were. Like, we're really intentional about creating shared understanding, common language, and reiterating the point, because change takes time. It takes time and it takes commitment. So I would say we're beginning to see it at our employee level. If you're to give up another practical example, this year with our Title I planning, we actually supported our principals with planning to do just what Mr. Parker said, use that Title I money to advance equity and supplement what we're already doing. So not indicting anyone that anything was going on wrong, but really being strategic again and intentional about using our dollars and focusing on the main goal of embedding equity in the core of what we do.
So if I could add to that just a bit, I'll say, for me, one of the core principles of equity that people don't often talk about, again, is transparency. Like, it's impossible to create an equitable environment if you're not really clear about the inequities that exist. So we've been really strategic and intentional about doing a few things this past 18 months that we're going to create the foundation for our district to truly invest in its core principles in equity. And I'll say there are three components there. First and foremost, we plotted a 4-year path with our strategic framework. Community connected. We visited a number of stakeholders in the community. We held open meetings. We partnered with Promise Neighborhoods, the United Way, Upside Allentown, to do some community meetings to really get a sense of where our community's vision, thoughts, and judgments of the district would be, and really develop that along with some of our internal data into the strategic framework that laid out our vision, our mission, and our long-term objectives for the district. Two things that were outgrowths of that were a complete and a fiscal audit, right? And the fiscal audit really begins to drive the vision around where our resources have been and are, 5-year look back, 5-year look forward. What are the cost drivers and constraints that the district will have in terms of being able to equitably provide high quality education for all students? And then just this past, I think February, we completed our comprehensive curriculum audit. And this is, not an audit that many districts do, especially urban districts that have holes. But we made a commitment to equity. So we made that commitment to transparency, and we made that commitment to addressing the systemic issues that are driving success or non-success for our kids. So we have a 400-page fiscal audit, curriculum audit that identifies all of the areas that our students and our schools are not performing at a high level and some of the drivers for how we get there. And for us, that was really important so that we could see the root cause issues and have our Office of Equity and Accountability really begin to lead our organization through addressing root cause issues. So if there's a overrepresentation of Black male and low SES students, they're overrepresented in courses that are for remedial students and underrepresented in courses for advanced students. There's no way we can be a district that's focused on equity if we don't call that out and then be willing to stand in public, say that it's a problem, and then begin to implement and utilize our resources to address it. And that becomes our commitment to equity as an organization that lives beyond just the individual, but becomes an organizational expectation.
Wow, this is powerful. And for all of our students out here, our UPAL students, our educational leadership students, what you're actually seeing here is this kind of implementation of not only just a vision. We talk a little bit about this idea between the rhetoric and the reality. And a lot of places have made the commitment to equity with regard to the rhetoric. Because it's the thing we need to say now. This is the direction where we're going. But tangible outcomes, evidence-based kinds of outcomes, that's where the rubber really hits the road. And what you heard here, the language of equity and accountability, by putting those two together, is powerful outcomes. I think you're next.
I guess I am. I was just thinking, it's not only you who, the board who needs to be transparent, but it's also the other stakeholders that are involved. And maybe by you also being so courageous and transparent in that nature, it also creates others to act in the same way. That wasn't a question. I'm sorry. So how do you, as an educational leader, how do you face controversial issues? Resources may be an issue, budget, so on and so forth. So how do you handle those challenges?
So interestingly, I can use my exact same last answer for this as well. Those controversial issues, they really require us to build a level of trust. Anytime that there's an urban district, there's going to always be controversial issues. There's always going to be something that happens, whether it's, safety concerns or fiscal concerns, and safety, I say psychological as well as physical safety, because we have lots of I'll call vulnerable populations of students that don't feel safe in environments, and we have to address those. So there's always going to be something. But as leaders, we have to be, a level of transparent and a level of trustworthy so that we allow people to bring those issues to us in a way that we can have meaningful conversations about how to address them. So this past year in ASD, and again, there's no secret that we've been in a fiscal spiral for a number of years, but we were transparent about those issues. And I think that led to some really serious and meaningful conversation with our local and state legislators, as well as PDE. And we were able to address some of our fiscal concerns through a generous gift and support from PDE and from the governor's office. But it was really important that we had those conversations. So our local legislators, Senator Brown, Representative Swire and Schlossberg, they would not be here supporting our district in that way if they didn't believe that there was a level of honesty and trust. When we had issues with safety last year after the Parkland shooting, Parkland, Florida, to be accurate. So after that Parkland, Florida shooting, there were a number of I call them shock waves after the fact here in ASD and other districts around the area, where, you know, it's students that were calling in fake security issues. We actually had a meeting with our community. We held it over at Deer High School. We invited kids, we invited parents, we invited stakeholders to just ask them how they felt about safety and what did they need to ensure safe and supportive learning environments. And then we committed to addressing those concerns. Everything's not done. We have financial constraints, but we've been working towards addressing those needs and listening to our community and listening and engaging in a meaningful way. And that allows us to be kind of trustworthy in addressing some of those kind of high interest kind of issues.
Excellent. Now, how about this one? I mean, this is still within the wheelhouse of equity. How do you envision support for youth who need classroom accommodations, such as hearing impaired, visually impaired, children on the autism spectrum, and related disabilities? So how does that sort of fold into the plan for equity? Because sometimes special education becomes the, you know, sort of the other side of the story, but it doesn't always get highlighted. And there's a huge struggle on this side, especially with families who are trying to advocate for their child and, you know, really make sure that they're getting that free and appropriate education.
Yeah, so in ASD, we have one of the, and I'm almost willing to say the fastest growing special needs population in the Commonwealth. So we have a large number of those groups of babies that need that additional support and need the organization to understand and resource allocate in a way that allows them to have support, but to also have the same level of normalcy that everybody else has in the organization. So we take that approach that our responsibility is to ensure that we're appropriately allocating resources and that we're appropriately listening and engaging our parents and our kids in those spaces where IEP students exist just as much in other areas. And just one stat to your point, in 2011, ASD had 17 classrooms of students with autism, 17 classrooms across the entire district. That number today is 40. So you've seen we've doubled, almost tripled the number of students we're serving in a 7-year period that have that designation in their IEPs. So we've had to readjust and invest differently from the director of special education services in the district. We've implemented special education facilitators that weren't a position in the district a few years ago, but we know that we need additional layers of oversight to ensure that, I'm a big stickler on this, that IEPs are implemented and evaluated effectively and with full compliance with the law, and that parents have voices and people that they can reach out to when those issues occur. Because just like we just spoke, there are always going to be issues. God forbid the bus is late. There are always going to be issues that kind of cause friction. But is there someone that parents can trust, will hear their concerns and address them? That's been a really core piece of our approach there.
And if I could add to that, we also recently implemented an Office of Family and Community Engagement. And through that office, partnering with our special ed department, we've created these monthly sort of boutique sessions for special ed parents to come in and learn about advocacy and empowerment and sort of support them as they travel with their student through our educational organization from K to 12. I think we're in our third installment of a monthly session, and each month is a different topic to support our parents. So really stressing family and community engagement to support.
Yep. Well, that's good to hear. And also, if I would also want to toss in here the idea that sometimes when we go into the educational process, special education, one of the big complaints, and you hear this a lot in the literature, is the idea that it gets segregated, right? That, it's special, sort of gets put, but that separate is not always equal.
Not on my watch.
Right. So it's good to hear of that kind of commitment, and I would also hope that that we're also looking towards, because a lot of the literature and a lot of the researchers are really talking about full inclusion and as much as possible mainstreaming and getting our kids in with with this autism, their neurotypical peers or their able-bodied their other peers, to get them all together, because they benefit from with one another.
So this is just another issue, as there are many, as you were saying. So there have been some prostitution stings in Allentown as well as the Lehigh Valley, and it's been increasing over the past 5 years. So how do you or your district as a mandated reporter help to protect youth who are vulnerable to sexual exploitation?
So again, to the point that we're mandated reporters, if we do hear, perceive, believe that there are any issues, then first and foremost we make those contacts with the local authorities. Either if that's a kind of principal level, they perceive an issue, or teacher level, the expectation is always that we make the appropriate contacts to the district, to the authorities, and then that information kind of comes to the district to address. I'll say that even through the number of things that have happened over the past few years, I don't get a sense that ASD has really been engaged in those issues. I'm sure that there are some students that have been touched from a family standpoint, but I don't get a sense that we've been intimately engaged. But we've made sure that all of our teachers and leaders are aware of their responsibility to report. And if there is an issue, we're always ready to respond and address safety needs and concerns for kids.
That's great. That's great to hear. And, you probably knew this question was coming. How is it going with regard to the district's academic improvement plan? Because, in today's era, everybody's looking at, how you're doing, test scores, academic improvement, and really using that to, to really, that data really drives decisions, not only academic decisions, but all kind of other decisions. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the academic improvement plan.
So the beautiful part about this is that we're in this little bit of a flux right now, with the transition to ESSA. They've kind of reset the vision for how schools are measured for success, and it's much more holistic view than just test scores, but it also includes some of those other elements that we know are important, but are now going to be measured pieces of academic importance.
You might want to speak to ESSA a little bit for our viewers who might not be familiar.
Okay. Well, I'm going to kick to the ESSA expert because, so when you talk equity, when you talk equity and accountability, that is where ESSA exists. So I'll let Dr. Brown just take that one.
So ESSA is the acronym for our federal level educational policy, Every Student Succeeds Act. And one of the attractive pieces or components of ESSA is exactly what Mr. Parker was articulating, a more holistic view with quantifiable metrics that we can sort of value those students that or those districts that may not traditionally perform well, but do well in other areas. So there's a career readiness benchmark. We have an industry-based certification benchmark that's coming up. And personally, why I'm particularly excited about that, speaking to your point about special ed students and the NOCTI exam, and how are we preparing these students to take on, that are capable to take on a trade and be and participate in society in a meaningful way, regardless of whatever IEP or disability they may have. So ESSA is really exciting because it sort of meets districts where they are and allows them to compete more evenly, if you will, and not just focus on state standard assessments.
And so to kind of pick that back up, knowing that, in the assessment area, the base test score area, we've traditionally not been a district that has competed with the peer districts around in terms of test scores. Our focus is really on growth, and under ESSA, we're allowed and encouraged to even more acutely measure overall achievement, but that growth of the entire student population, but those specific subgroups as well over time. So you'll notice in ESSA designations that the special education students, the ESOL babies, they all are specific subgroups that require us to significantly increase their growth and achievement over time, and that becomes the standard for all the districts and for all the schools rather within the district.
Excellent. And if you're listening carefully, what you're getting from these educational leaders, if you listen to the language and how they refer to the students, our babies, which is also important. In my doctoral program, one of my colleagues once said, words are containers of power. So you can tell people's commitment with regard to how they refer to, especially to the students, and that's encouraging to hear.
What advice would you give to new principals and superintendents getting into their new positions and roles?
So all jokes aside, the advice I would give to someone walking into one of these positions is courage, right? First and foremost, courage. All of the skills that you gain throughout the preparation and your learning and your degree attainment will all hinder or all live in one space. And that space is going to require you to unlock the level of courage you have to challenge convention and to lead innovatively, to lead with heart, to lead with soul, and to utilize the level of courage you have to advocate for the best interests of the kids you serve. So do all the work, gain all the skills, listen to the people who have walked the path before, because there are no new ideas under the sun, right? There's always someone who's touched on what you're trying to do. So find those best practices, find that information, and build upon and expand it. But when you get to the point of being the leader in an organization, the conversation is always that a superintendent and a principal are the loneliest people in an organization, because you lead that space sometimes alone, and you have to have the courage to continue to lead and continue to push and to continue to pass that vision throughout every layer and level of your organization. And if you have the courage and you put in the time, work, and effort to gain the skills, ultimately you'll find success.
Oh, wow. Look. As another career, you think about preaching?
Well, my daddy was a Mississippi Baptist deacon.
Wow.
So
all right.
That's
Now,
funny.
one question that was generated from one of our adjuncts. You have to put your principal hat back
All
on
right.
for this one, and the question deals with as the building leader, when it's time to do, to actually, evaluate. If your particular educational background is not in music, or it's not in history, or it's not in English, then how do you go about carrying out those kind of evaluations if you're not a content expert yourself?
So I'd say there are two answers to that. As a leader, your responsibility is to get the information you don't have. So I may not be a music teacher, but if I'm going to be principal of the building, I had better go learn about some of the elements of music instruction that are going to allow me to understand high quality instruction when I see it. So the onus is on the leader to expand their skill set across the scale and scope of the organization. That doesn't mean you need to dive deep and know it at the most discrete level, but you had better know some of the basics enough to be credible in those conversations. And then the second side is good instruction is good instruction. The way people learn are the way people learn. There are, I think, variances based on content area. But you can walk into a classroom of math, English, music, PE, and you can know whether or not that teacher is engaging children in a process of learning and acquisition that's going to lead to them improving their base levels of skill, knowledge, and information. So if you're building your skill set as a principal to allow you to scale across the organization, and you understand high quality instruction and how that crosses the instructional genres, if you will, then it allows you to be an evaluator, even if it's not your core level of expertise.
Yeah. Well put. Well stated. So that answers that that particular question.
Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't really. I mean, just happy to be here and share, I guess, an update on the progress that Allentown has made under our new leadership at the governance level as well as the superintendent level. And good to hear your feedback because you're an outside looking in and have been here and seen the trajectory prior to Mr. Parker coming in. So.
And for me, again, I would just say I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am a transplant here to the Valley. And, you know, sometimes outsiders have a tough time. I've been welcomed and invited into the Valley on so many levels. So having the opportunity to be the physical representation of this district's commitment to equity has been a really exciting opportunity. I sit here as a superintendent and the chief teaching officer of the district. I sit here as the lead servant of the district. I sit here as a parent in the district. So the commitment that I have to ensuring that this district is best meeting the needs of children is extensive. And I'm excited to continue the path, knowing that we won't get there tomorrow, we won't get there the next day. But if we continue the path and we continue to grow, then Allentown School District will be one of the top districts in the Valley, in the state, and in the nation. And our students will graduate college and career ready with dynamic opportunities in work and life.
All right, well stated. I can't add anything to that. Folks, we want to thank you for your time and commitment. We want to certainly thank Mr. Parker. We also want to thank Dr. Creisha Brown. We also want to thank our folks off camera, Tashina. We want to thank you again for supporting Lehigh University, supporting our local schools, and great examples like the Allentown School District. Join us again next month, where I don't know the guest just yet, but that's all right. We like to keep you guessing. So for Tashina, for our guests, we'll see you next time on Education for the 21st Century. Take care.